Everyone, let's go ahead and kick things off. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome everyone to this very special Lean Into Allyship event that we have titled A Broken System, Injustice in the Court of Law, with special guest Judge Everett Mitchell. That our intention behind Lean Into Allyship is to empower would-be allies to create honest and action-driven spaces and conversations to grow together. We really want you to have the opportunity to drive the discussion and get as much value as possible out of each event. So we do encourage you to join the conversation by entering your questions in the Q&A along the way. So we will not be using the chat function. Our team will be sharing resources in that area, but please do share your questions in the Q&A as we go. And we will look to address as many of those as we can later in the session. And we, like I said, we do try and get to those questions. We often have a lot of them, and we're so grateful for that engagement. We do track them on the back end and try and carry them through to future sessions. So please don't hold back or hesitate to let us know what's on your minds and your hearts. All right, thank you so much for sharing. We have quite a few first timers, a lot of friends here from the Madison area. I see that we have a Madison court observer here, which I'm assuming we might talk a little bit about later in the session as a volunteer opportunity with Nehemiah. So that's excellent. So again, yes, just thank you to everyone that is here. Oh, I see someone just completed the Justified Anger course, and a lot of third-time attendees as well. So excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that information. That really helps us know kind of who we're talking to and who we're growing alongside. So if this is not your first Lean Into Allyship event, you have likely heard us advocate in the past to please strongly consider donating to Nehemiah, as we cannot and do not expect them to support these events and educate us for free. So with that in mind, definitely if you have a company match program, make sure to implement and take advantage of that to maximize the impact of your dollar. Additionally, if you've joined us previously, you know that our conversations are rich in content and often supplemented with excellent supporting resources via that real-time chat, thanks to our behind the scenes team from Nehemiah. So our advice would really be to don't worry about capturing everything that's unpacked tonight. We really just highly recommend that you spend the next hour soaking in the information, being present, asking questions. We always send a follow-up email with all of our resources referenced and the recording of the event and a link to where our previous events are stored on Justified Anger's YouTube page. So if we could really just encourage you to be here now and take in the conversation, and rest assured that everything that we supply you with along the way, you will have after the fact as well. So tonight, we truly have an incredible agenda to dig into with our very special guest, Judge Everett Mitchell. The event flow will include 30 to 40 minutes for Dr. G and Judge Mitchell in one-on-one dialogue around the standing racial disparities and injustice of our justice system. As Judge Mitchell shared with one of our team members during our event prep, these are topics that we certainly can't finish, but we can start a conversation, a thoughtful conversation on. So we are just really grateful to get to do that tonight. Following that, we will have an attendee Q&A, which I had referenced. And then from there, we'll have a chance to learn more about current volunteer involvement and educational opportunities from Nehemiah through Rebecca Compton-Allen, who is their Director of Mobilization. And then we will wrap things up with a preview of May's event and introducing one of our newer features for this year, our Ally in Action Challenge, which is really meant to deepen our commitment to educating, donating, and affiliating. So as we get started, for anyone new to the event, my name is Samantha Jefferson. I am an ally in training and proud participant of the Lean Into Allyship initiative, along with Dan Beltran, who will be joining us a little bit later in the event. I would love to, before I pass things over to Dr. G and Judge Mitchell, just take a moment to introduce them both at a high level and express our sincere gratitude for their participation this evening. And then we'll let them take it away for about 30 to 40 minutes until we can get back together and kind of continue the dialogue. So Dr. Alex G is the president, founder, and visionary for the nonprofit Nehemiah. Their vision is to engage the greater Madison community to empower African American individuals, families, and communities to bring about hope, transformation, and justice. Nehemiah's work focuses on 5 core areas, including education, economic development, incarceration, family and community wellness, and leadership and capacity development. Dr. G has 35 years of experience in this space, serving as an advisor to leaders across the world, and his efforts include educating, coaching, and mobilizing white allies, as he is here investing in just that with us this evening. Similar to Dr. G, we would need a fully separate segment to list all of the accomplishments and accolades that our special guest, Judge Everett Mitchell, carries along with him. But briefly, he is a circuit court judge and is now the presiding judge of the Juvenile Division of Dane County. He is also the senior pastor at the Christ the Solid Rock Baptist Church. And we are just so honored to have him joining us and cannot think of a better individual to share his experience and perspective on tonight's topic. Welcome, gentlemen, and we will let you take it away.
Samantha, thank you so much. It is great to be here. It's an honor to be here. And before I warmly welcome our special guest, Samantha, I just want to say to you and to Dan and to Lauren and the folks from Generator and AJ, how proud I am of our partnership, how on a monthly basis you help with all the technical behind the scenes things to make this come across as polished and as it is, and I really appreciate it. And also I'm glad to be flanked by my colleagues here, Rebecca Compton Allen, affectionately known as RCA in our team, and my colleague Don Thornton. So appreciate you all being here. Judge Mitchell has been introduced, but I just also want to say that he has an illustrious educational background. He studied at Jarvis Christian College, I believe that's in Texas, Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, where he received his BA. He received 2 degrees from Princeton Theological Seminary, both his MDiv, Master's in Divinity, and Master's of Theology. And man, this brother is not a slacker. And his JD, or his law degree from UW-Madison Law School in 2010. In addition to all of his experiences as a Dane County Circuit Judge, just last year he was appointed as an adjunct faculty member at the UW Law School. He's a colleague and a friend, and we've known each other and worked together through good times and bad, shoulder to shoulder, particularly during all of the craziness that happened in 2020. And Judge Mitchell, man, I'm so honored to have you here. Welcome to Lean Into Allyship. Thank you for this, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you, man. I figured that the best way I can make sure allies know is to make sure you look on my shirt, vote. So you start thinking about some things to do ahead of time. Like, I mean, you're going to keep saying this over while I keep talking. Vote.
That, man, that is important. That is so important. Listen, man, just like when we gathered at my podcast, this is just laid back space with folks from all across the country, not only across the state, but across the country. And folks are really, they're still leaning in. Judge, they're still trying to figure out what next steps to take. Some people, hide out in spaces like this, and we push them out. We tell them to educate, donate, affiliate, get connected. Others come in for inspiration because they want to learn what they don't know so that they can be a part of the solution. But Dan, Samantha, and the team that I honored a little bit earlier have been helping with this vision for over a year and bringing their peers and folks like them together just to figure out how do we move ahead. And so I just want to jump in and just have some dialogue with you. Man, it seems like every other day something major is happening in the news regarding judicial justice, police brutality, march, a protest, another family sitting with their attorney on someone's couch on Good Morning America, the Today Show, talking about watching body cams of seeing the loved one being shot. So I just want to process some of that with you a little bit. But first of all, let me just jump in and just ask the obvious thing, because I may not be able to get here, Judge. The ruling on the George Floyd murder case, were you surprised at all at the outcome? Well, first of all, let me ask, were you surprised that the jury came back as quickly as they did? And were you surprised at the outcome?
No and no. I was been listening to the case, and so I anticipated that the evidence that was being presented was going to, lead a jury in only one direction. The defense really didn't put on any evidence that a jury had to weigh. what made this significantly different, and I'm not the first person who recognized this, is that in most cases you never have police officers testify against other police officers.
Right.
So the blue testimony broke down the blue wave and the blue wall. And so that allowed for officers and jurors to hear for the first time in a long time that the actions of that officer, I don't even give his name, I won't say his name, that the actions of that officer was unreasonable, that he's not trained like that. That's not how they were trained. That is not what a reasonable officer would do. And all of that went to the legal standards that, the jury had to weigh in that decision. So I think that the prosecution really laid a roadmap and followed that roadmap so that the only conclusion that the jury could bring back was guilty on all counts.
Sure. Now, there are some folks in here, Judge, who have not watched these kinds of cases very closely. They're not a judicial professional like you are. They don't work in human services and civil rights work that I do. So I'm constantly looking at these things. Many of them are too young to remember the Rodney King verdict. It is not common. I mean, let's just underscore this. It is not common for police to testify against police in these type of cases, whether they're highly profiled or not. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of another instance, and I'm sure there might be, but I can't think of another instance where I've seen that type of collaboration with law enforcement to work with the district attorney in prosecuting these kind of cases. I mean, you talk about the chief trainer for the officer, people, different colleagues who are responsible for training of law enforcement in the Minneapolis area, all were on the witness list of the prosecution rather than the witness list of the defense. And I think that made a significant difference. And I think about the number of cases that I have watched and looked at over the years where there was no opportunity for a prosecution to kind of lay their foundation to get to a place of reasonableness, to say that this is not reasonable, because there was just nobody to testify against that individual.
Sure. Now, we watched cases concerning whether or not there's going to be an indictment against the police officers in the Michael Brown case in Ferguson, Eric Garner. We watched case after case after case and watched police officers walk. And I say this with no disrespect. My little brother's a police officer in Chicago, has been for almost 30 years. I'm very proud of him and the work that he does with great integrity, and all of the women and men who serve with him. But yet, this was a different outcome. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, what do you think has shifted? Because I have to tell you, even though I felt like it was a pretty open and shut case, to whatever extent that means, but I thought the Eric Garner case was, and it was. I mean, I thought so many were. So I got to tell you, I was shocked when they came back and just that quickly and started reading the guilty verdict. I almost started sobbing, and it wasn't like, I want somebody to go to jail, because they didn't bring George Floyd back. Mm-hmm. But I was really shocked and moved emotionally that I was witnessing this type of justice. So I guess I threw a lot of things in there. What made this shift seem different? And am I alone in feeling this sense of shock, relief, but also this emotional outburst that, wow, this is justice, and I'm not used to this feeling.
Yeah, I would say that for me, they've been able to get convictions, but I would say to me that I didn't sense that this conviction meant justice, because it really hasn't changed anything. I mean, we watched a man get lynched and murdered for, now we know it's 9 minutes and 26 seconds, right before our eyes, and people felt powerless to do anything about it. So to me, the notion that this man could be, murdered right in front of us and right in front of the community and public was a reminder of this kind of systemic ways in which policing, at least in this context and in his mind, at least in that one person's mind, had devolved into a place that doesn't represent what even policing should represent, right? That's not even good policing. That was murder. And I think the communities are being educated, because so many, I mean, you got to think about this, Alex. When we started this conversation in 2015, after the death of Tony Robinson, which was on the heels of all of the instances of Tamir Rice and Eric Gardner, Mike Brown, all kicking off with George Zimmerman, the notion of Black Lives Matter was seen as a terrorist statements, right?
Right.
Right. But now in 2019, 2020, Black Lives Matter is more of a common understanding because all of these different groups have been pushing to raise the consciousness of our allies over the years. So I think the conscious raising has allowed for different individuals to see things a little differently, just like they did with the civil rights movement, right? Once Selma was broadcast on NBC and ABC and CBS, it changed the dramatic tensions, right, of those individuals. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is the bringing to the consciousness of why this is important, and then educating individuals so that they are commonly aware that this is an issue that none of us want to say represents the best of our country.
Right. And then meanwhile, on the heels of this, what is it, 10 miles away?
Yeah, Dante. Yeah,
Dante gets shot by a police officer
on accident.
On an accident, and she's saying taser, taser, taser.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean when I say, it's not justice, because justice has not created the change, right? You see the young girl in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, the 17-year-old girl in foster care system, raised in the foster care system, traumatic, Michaela, and she gets, shot and her life taken. So these incidences are things that we have to continue to keep conscious raising until we can get, a change in the Supreme Court standard, which has kind of led to this.
Everett, people are thinking that our judicial system is devolving, that something is happening that's making things unravel. I'm just curious, in your study of America's judicial history, has our court system, our legal system, ever been held at this current level of contempt and distrust? And I know we have social media, so we see more things more quickly. But I just think in general, is this current level of contempt and distrust common? Is it peaking? Is it waning? How do you see this level of distrust within our criminal our judicial justice?
I think it is. I think for me, I speak for me. I think it is a welcomed criticism, right? I think the courtroom observers, the people who are interested in these issues, have made the judiciary pay more attention to even how we talk, how we respond, how we act, because most of the time the judicial spaces were left unchecked. And so how they talk to people, how they treated people, the decisions that they made, the type of decisions that are being rendered, all of that stuff is left, in many ways, had been left unchecked. And I think the conscious raising makes people aware that they're not just putting on a black robe and they can hide behind the cloak of invisibility and nobody cares. No, everybody's caring. Everybody's paying attention. And I think that is bringing more weight to the things and the decisions that we make for everyday lives. So whether you sentencing people, you got to pay attention to how you sentencing people, how you talking to people, the kinds of things that you are advocating for and standing for as a judge, or the types of ways in which you're leading, right? Are we leading as judicial officers on issues of justice and fairness in real time, rather than trying to say, well, as a judge, I only worry about case by case basis? I don't think that's acceptable anymore. I think this position needs to demonstrate that fairness looks a certain kind of way, and we have to be willing to present what that certain kind of way looks like.
Do you think this level of scrutiny, really, scrutiny almost sounds pejorative, but I say this level of accountability for our elected judicial leaders, do you think this current level of scrutiny is going to drive a different ilk of individuals to run for the bench, or will we keep continuing to draw people who haven't really thought much about the accountability?
I mean, if you just look in Dane County in general, man, you're seeing way more different types of people coming into the bench like you've never seen before, right? And Milwaukee too. I mean, different people are starting to realize that this place is not just reserved for the traditional white man.
Yeah,
that we as individuals have to use these skills and talents and be at the seat to be the ones who make the decisions.
Right.
And then when you're in that seat, you're the ones who provide the barrier. That's why these kind of positions are so dangerous. They don't care about if we entertain them. They don't care if we go play some basketball, do some rap music. But when you start talking about, I want to raise a generation of judges, then that's where you that's the
Yes.
activist state. That's the activist state. I want to raise a generation of activist judges. And by activist judges, I keep saying activist just means I'm trying to activate the Constitution to be representative of all people. That's what kind of judges we need sitting on the bench. Like, we want this to work for all people, not just for certain people. And until we get that, and as we are getting that, you're going to start seeing different types of people who bring a different humanity to the bench when they sit down on it and begin to render decisions for people.
Wow. That's powerful. And that gives me a lot of hope to Judge. A friend of mine, we didn't know each other at the time, but a group of 4 judges, Dane County Circuit judges, went through our Justified Anger U.S. Black History course. And I think in part because our court observers were sitting in their courts noting how Black and brown people were treated in response to their white colleagues. But one of them, Jill Karofsky, was elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court in an amazing way. That whole thing went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and how we're going to, whether or not we could change our election date. So she and I talked about that on our podcast. But she recently approached me and said, "Hey, Alex, I got so much out of that U.S. Black History course. Judges need continuing education. Would you be willing to provide some training?" And so I solicit the support of my colleague, Dr. Christy Clark-Pujara, UW professor from the Afro-Am department. If you go on to our U.S. Black History course, she's the rock star that teaches that. Well, we are teaching all 9 judiciaries. I don't know if I'm calling the name right, judiciary districts, but all 9 already trained too, starting with Kenosha. And you know the significance of that. I'll just say starting with Kenosha. And so I just want people to understand, you don't have to change the whole world at one time. This was one person who was the Dane County Circuit judge who ran for Supreme Court and did not forget what they learned. She said, I've got to affiliate. I've been educated. I've been supporting. Now I've got to do something. Affiliating means that you don't just come to Zoom discussions like this. This is a step, friends, but you have to begin to ask, what's my sphere of influence? And so what I'm realizing is there are 9 districts. We just trained the district that includes Door County, and we're working our way around the state. But these are court commissioners, judges. We've even had Supreme Court justices sit in on the training. But these are things that folks whose eyes are being opened, who are really experiencing being woke and not just sleepwalking, are using their power to make sure that this becomes a part of judicial continuing education. Now, you can lead a horse to water, the saying goes, and not make them drink. However, every district, every judiciary district is going to have to sit and be trained by 2 African-American scholars and practitioners on how the Constitution, the document which each of them has sworn to defend, is really a pro-slavery document. And we just want to help them to understand it. But it's interesting to me, Judge, the pushback is very interesting. And no one's ever mean or clobbering us. But basically what some of the judges are saying is, but justice is blind. What would King say about your suggestion that we take race and history and culture into our consideration as we're sitting on the bench? We're just ruling by the law. And if we do that, what would King say? What about not seeing, the color of our skin, but the content of our character? And I said, well, Your Honor, all due respect, King was talking to y'all. Black mothers have been telling their sons and daughters for centuries, you are not just the color of your skin and you are not 3/5 of a person. But had y'all listened to King 60, 70 years ago, I wouldn't be doing this training right now. So you can't ignore 70 years of King's teaching. Then all of a sudden now you want to ask me, what would King think if he knew you were teaching this? He would think white people, like, what are y'all going to listen? So when you mentioned that we got to get judges as activists on the bench, and that's a mouthful. You saying something with that, sir.
But I would say that a way to get judges' mindset, because obviously we're supposed to be, what there's a whole history of Supreme Court cases that talks about the Constitution as being colorblind, and the notion of colorblindness is that we look at individuals, but where you got to hammer them, Alex, and don't let them off is discretion. That's the word you have to focus on. It's not our rulings may not be fueled by race because it's fueled by evidence that is presented to us in some cases, but it is the discretion that we give to everything that happens before us, right? What are we going to do with our discretion when we see a single Black mother who comes in and who may miss a court hearing? Do we necessarily issue a warrant? Do we have to issue a warrant, right? What do we do with, a Black man who's trying to fight for his children, and how do we make sure that he doesn't have wrapped up in child support? Or do we explain to him the process so that he can go and advocate for himself the way he needs to? It is, I always tell my students at the law school, I said, there's case law and there is, statutes. And I say in between all that is the discretion that we are given to make everyday decisions that impact people's lives, and so, what kind of evidence we let in, how we let, pro se litigants articulate themselves. So when you're hammering them, don't focus so much on the rulings, focus on the broad latitude of discretion, because it's in the discretion that judges show their racial bias, because you're not making decisions based on color blindness. You're making a decision that is informed by your social, economic, racial lens, and it's that lens that determines what you decide to do in this moment. So that's why I think for me, you want to, bring that to them to help them better understand that. Does that make sense?
It does. You educate me, Judge. You know what? That makes me think. Don, I just dropped something. Lauren, can someone just let me know if the participants can see the link I just dropped? Or if not, Don, if you see it, can you copy it and drop it? But thank you, Lauren.
Good.
There was an article that was just written by Deneen Smith in February, and it was a study that shows the sharply different sentencing outcomes by race in 3 county judicial districts, and one of them being Kenosha. Now, inside this document, there's a recommendation that says as we get more judges of color, it will change ruling outcomes. And so I remember asking Justice Karofsky this on my podcast recently. I said, wait a minute, Justice, you're telling me that outcomes will change if more people who look like me sit on the bench? She said, absolutely. And now I'm getting it, Everett. She's talking about discretion.
She's talking about discretion.
She gave me an example once, a couple of years ago. She said, I call it a ride along, but I actually sat with her on her bench for an afternoon. And between cases, she said, Alex, there's an African-American gentleman who kept appearing before me. And he had an ankle bracelet on, and he kept having curfew violations. She said, I remember what you said in my history class, that U.S. Black history class. And she said, I thought to myself, damn it, this is my courtroom. I can use some discretion. She said, young man, what can I do to stop you from appearing in my court? He said, Judge, I'm working. I'm not out here in these streets wilding out. If you could just change my curfew so that I can finish working, making money so I can pay my rent, ride the bus home, and stop coming in these courtrooms, I won't keep having this information showing up on my record. She made a ruling to change his curfew. He never appeared in her court again. That's something simple, but that was discretion. Because if you keep building that up, if he does get into trouble, I imagine people can say, well, look, he appeared on this date and this date and this date and this date. She got him out of her courtroom and closer to being out of the system. And so folks who are listening, our friends who are leaning in, we got to do what the Honorable Everett Mitchell Church says. We got to vote. We got to be able to understand that national elections are fantastic, but these other kinds of elections like school board, city council, supervisors, but also these judicial elections, we must vote because these folks have discretion and they can make a difference in people's lives.
Yep. And one of these days, I'm looking to join GL on that Wisconsin Supreme Court so we can continue to make more discretion and more power for the entire state, Well,
listen, when you do ready to do it, I want you to help to make part of your early announcement on Black Like Me. So when you're getting close to thinking about that, let me. All right, brother.
I'm coming on you. We're going to talk about that.
Oh, my. Folks don't know because they also know that we're ministers. I felt that in my spirit. I want you to know I felt a quickening.
Amen.
Yeah, they might have to visit a black church. Know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
They might have to do it. Let me see what I want to ask you, because I know others are going to be coming in. So this is kind of broad, Everett, but let's just see if we can talk it for a minute. So we continue to talk about judicial justice, or the perceived lack of it. And what I realize is when you talk to Department of Corrections, they'll say, hey, we're not picking up people and bringing them to our prisons. They're coming to us through the police and through the DA and through the courts. And the courts are saying we're not Department of Corrections, and the police are saying we're not the DA. And so I know we need all of it. And Nehemiah's been doing some work to make sure that we have the DA, the sheriff, the public defender, DOC, nonprofit leaders, formerly incarcerated folks, all at the table, bringing together the strength of our organization so we can have some organizational capital as we begin to work together. But from your perception, there's plenty of finger pointing, but what are some of the early places where change begins in correcting some of the corruption and just partiality in our legal system? Where does it begin?
Well, one, I think, what you're talking about is really bringing those issues to bear, right? Identifying, you got to think about it. Most people don't have any idea who the judges are, right? I think most people may know who I am because I'm just, been in the community, been out, but most people don't even know the name of, they can't, if you did that as a quiz, name 10, you'd be like, I give you $100 if you can name 7 local judges. You walk back with your money.
The money is safe.
Yeah, right. Your money is totally safe because we are not attentive. But I think the true balance of it is really thinking about who are the people that you want in that seat to be able to make decisions that make sense, right? Who are the individuals who will make that decision for those individuals? And that's what I think, that's where it begins, right? And I can tell you, man, I have some great colleagues throughout the state. And I have a lot of people who are trying to, work in different areas, but it is hard to change not only just judicial culture, but it's hard to change policing culture, bailiff culture, the way that we think about sentencing and the way we think about individuals and the way we think about crime. What I have noticed, Alex, since I took over our drug court, so I run the high risk drug court here in Dane County. Okay. I got a whole bunch of jobs, and so I took on high risk drug court. And what I noticed, Alex, is that when it comes to white people, there is no war on drugs. There is treatment on drugs.
What?
Do you hear what I'm saying?
Let's type that. Yes.
Yeah, there's no war on drugs. There's treatment on drugs. And so when we were going through all of this, the calamity and the fear of drugs in, the 90s, 80s, and 90s, everybody was incarcerated. But here you're starting to see that, when it comes to certain individuals, now they're moving toward more treatment modalities. Man, I got people using drugs all the time. We're not locking them up. We're getting them treatment. We're getting them in, putting them in high places that cost money. We're giving them chance after chance after chance after chance to get themselves together. We're trying to make sure that they, doing everything we can to make sure that they get these opportunities to get this kind of treatment. And that's why I started to see the differences in when we start talking about the historical lenses and the racial lenses that you can bring to people's attention, because it is totally different. That the ways in which we are now approaching the opioid crisis is so significantly different than how we approach the crack crisis. And I'm conscious of that every time I sit in the seat and I have my, and I bring this to my treatment team's decision. Like, we'll be sitting there and they'll be like, well, this person needs to be sentenced. This person needs to go to jail. And I'll bring this to attention. I'm saying, but y'all didn't say that to the white dude. I said, he did the exact same thing. And y'all didn't talk about locking him up or cutting him off or doing none of that stuff. You gave him something else. So if we're going to treat people, we're going to treat them the same. Right. But you're not going to have me co-sign treating this brother different than you have me treating this other white dude. That's not going to happen. That's what we talk about in there. And these are people who go to equity trainings. But when it comes to public safety, Alex, when it comes to the idea of public safety, all that equity stuff, they throw that out the water, and because they now have power to make decisions over people, and they use that power to, to define whatever public safety may look like for them. So it's just important to have that courage, that lens, to be able to understand why when you sit and you make a decision, why it's important to know that history, because if you don't know the history on the war on drugs, you might treat this like it's brand new, but it's not.
You're opening our eyes to a whole lot of things, particularly that concept of leniency that is leveraged based upon people's perception. And so in that regard, justice is not blind, because that discretion, you get to move on that. There's a perception that that the opioid crisis is not a danger to society. But when you hear the word crack, it's like saying the boogeyman.
Man, you know what I'm saying?
Like, grab, what that one guy say, get your wife, get your daughter, they attacking everybody out here. That's just thought, this whole sense of fear, Willie Horton, all this stuff that's been used, particularly politically, to put fear in people, to drive white people to the polls to vote a particular way.
And you got to think about it. The reason why they do that is because they see there's children in these individuals, right? Because the majority of people in these systems are majority white people. So they see themselves in these people. They see themselves in their children. They see them as their husbands. They see them as their cousins and nephews and nieces. They don't see little Raheem and little Keisha as their family.
No, they don't.
So, but I stand on the bench. I'm like, they look more like my kids. So I don't see them as a beast, or see them as crazy or mean or a threat. I see them as children, and I call them children. And I treat them as children, and I talk to them as children, so that they understand that even though they in a crazy situation of the court system, that I still perceive them as young children who can be changed. And I had one of my judicial colleagues. I know this is a family oriented podcast, situation.
Actually, it's not.
It's not. So I had one of my colleagues, he was upset about one of the kids that stole a car from his neighborhood. And he was like, when I was in this rotation, if they weren't fixed by the age of 3, I just said, fuck them. And I'm ready to just say, fuck these kids. And I'm like, I'm sitting in my office, getting ready to respond to, what I'm saying? Like, did I just hear him say, like, he was in this seat and he was saying, fuck kids who had not been treated by the age of 3, because ain't nothing else to do with it. So then when we start talking about why are the disparities so rich, they may say to you, color is blind, but I just had a white dude tell me, fuck them.
Right.
If they're not fixed by the age of 3, right? So that means that how he processed and thought about cases when they came before him, we weren't talking about change. He was going to lock them up, because he didn't think that they had the capacity for rehabilitation in them.
And that mentality, Everett, doesn't go away overnight. You can't implicit bias train that out. You can't capitalize the being black and get that out. You can't watch Roots and get that out. That came from someplace, that was instilled, and those folks are being elected and reelected, and that's part of what's happening to our system. Folks, people don't want to believe that folks say that. No. Listen, here's the thing about it. I'm not shocked that the judge said, fuck him. I'm shocked at the fact that he puts on a black robe, gets on the bench, and then does what he says is going to happen. That's what gets me. I'm not shocked by what people say, but when you get up on the bench and you legislate and you make judgment that shows that you believe that and you mean that, and that's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. It's remember, many of the listeners here are too young to remember one of Tom Cruise's first breakout movies, Risky Business. But there's a one line that just says, if you can't say fuck it, you can't do it. Mm-hmm. And so the point is, if a judge has a boldness to say fuck them, he will get on that bench.
Yep.
That's why the system is fucked up.
Yep. And that's
saying that.
And when I heard that, I'm just like, okay. So systemic injustice is a reality, because, people will go to Rotary meetings and they may put on the face of, I don't like this person politically. I don't do this. But when it comes down to public safety, all the masks come off and they start looking like that Watchmen movie, because they got all this stuff in their closet that they ain't telling you about. And that is why I think what we're trying to, work hard to create is to open up people's minds to what is possible. And, when I couldn't get people to believe, that's why we started that documentary, Not Enough Apologies. to give more people an insight into what broken people go through, and that we can make those decisions in a more effective and powerful way. Because maintaining that perspective does impact the discretion that is given to judges on an everyday basis.
Yes, it does. Hey, Judge, I'm going to start pulling back in just a minute because I know people who are participating are putting questions up. Don, my assistant, is going to drop. Don, you just read my. No, Don, you're great, Don. UW just did a documentary about Judge Mitchell. It's a series called Why I Love UW, and it just tells about his story that's really incredible, what he had to overcome, his background, and it certainly helps you to realize why he's so effective on the bench. And so that link is out there for everyone. And when we do our follow-up email, you will all get a link to it too. But please copy this link. You want to watch this. This link is only like 5 minutes, and it's done and it's created impeccably by the team.
Alex. Alex.
Yes, sir.
And you want it. And then, if they could put in Not Enough Apologies, Trauma Stories, that was done on Wisconsin Public Television. That was one of the
pieces. So Don can put it in.
Not Enough Apologies, Trauma Stories.
Okay.
That was probably one of the most richest pieces that I worked on with Frederica Freiberg to help tell a story about what we see in the juvenile system and how it impacts children across our state.
Definitely. What Don's looking for, he's going to find it and drop it. So please, Judge, don't go anywhere. I'm just going to shift a little bit. Samantha, Dan, will you all like to come back in and just take us out through the rest of the hour? But I appreciate the fact, Judge, that you always make yourself available to the community, not just to the bench and to the powers that be, but in venues like this. And that's one of the reasons why I respect you so much. So thank you. They got a few questions for you, sir. I'll still be around if they got a few questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have quite a few questions come in on the Q&A. And so one of the ones that I wanted to a theme that was coming in, Judge, was about discretion. So Julia was asking, who is a private criminal defense attorney, about judicial discretion and so important. Whose responsibility is it to get judges into activism and to get into this education and realize how much their discretion matters? And Lynn was asking, what tools are missing in the community to increase judges' options for that discretion?
Whose responsibility is it? It's your responsibility. It's your responsibility. You have to cultivate, it's our responsibility as legal professionals to cultivate the generations of future lawyers and, and to begin to pull people into being judges and to spend that time. So that's the responsibility of the voters to really make a determination of who they want to see in that space, to give that power, to make that discretion available. That's the first line of defense. And every defense attorney who's working in these spaces, they know those individuals that they don't want to go in front of because they know that they have been there, and they should be the ones who run against that individual and, get the support from the community that they need to make sure that that individual, whether he or she is, choosing not to pay attention. Sometimes the best way to get people's attention is to, give them an opponent to let them know that people in the community are paying attention and they don't like this anymore, right? So that's part of, I forgot the second one from Lynn.
The second one was, let me go back to find it real quick here, was just what tools are missing in the community to increase the judges' options for that discretion?
That is an interesting question, Lynn, because a part of discretion is about creativity. So nothing in our power, especially in juvenile and even sometimes in adult, it's the willingness to be creative and trust that people and human beings can embrace that creativity and still live in a certain kind of way. So I don't think that we are, without resources. Heck, the Department of Corrections is the number one budget in the state, so they have the resources. But sometimes we lack the creativity and the commitment to that creativity because we don't really believe that, in these individuals. For example, in Wisconsin, it takes for one kid, it takes upwards to $200,000 to incarcerate one kid for 1 year. $200,000. Do you know what we could do with $200,000 per kid. I mean, Jesus, you could give them a private tutor, a private therapist. You could give them shoes, book, computers. You could do all of that stuff for them before they get into that kind of trouble that you have to incarcerate them for the rest of it. I mean, but again, that takes creativity and commitment and trust to believe that they are worth the investment rather than always being reactive when they do something and then respond that way.
Absolutely. Thank you for that insight. I think that kind of leads to another question that we saw as a heavy theme throughout the Q&A, as a follow-up to so much of the conversation around youth, right, in this broken system and the way that they are impacted kind of like once they're in the pipeline, right? So as an added question from both Amy and Leanne and Rosalind as well, they asked about how the Supreme Court decision about sentencing juveniles to life imprisonment, that recent ruling, how that will affect Black communities, how that impacts Wisconsin, and what we can do and how can we continue, of course, in addition to voting, as you have said, right? And we do hold the power of those decisions, but could you talk to us a little bit about what that means for us here?
That case, I believe, is the Alabama case, and that case was really about whether or not they can ask. They had to make some kind of finding in their statute before they could begin to move a kid to life imprisonment. And so all the Supreme Court did was basically say that, no, you don't have to make that finding for a judge to make that ruling to sentence them to life imprisonment. I would say that, from my perspective, the young people that, we think about, being, lifetime imprisonment are the ones that probably are the most traumatized and need the most assistance and help. And we have to figure out what is the right balance between making sure that victims are made whole because of the incidents that happened to them versus, trying to come out and, send a statement about, to others that we're not going to accept this kind of behavior anymore. One of the young men in that documentary, Not Enough Apologies, I'll tell you, just as you watch it, the first 9 minutes, you'll see a very courageous young man who was willing to allow people to see him and hear about his life and his pain. But that young man, did another crime in another county, and that judge sentenced him to 45 years. 45 years. He was in our system since the age of 5 years old, and at 16 years old was sentenced to 45 years in prison. 35 years. Now, that may not be a life sentence, but it might as well be a life sentence for him because he's been in the system since he's 5 years old, and he won't get out till he's over 45, almost 50 years old. And then he got another 20 years on top of that to finish off. So there's a lot of work that we can do to try to say, all right, we know about science, we know about brain development, we know that these young folks are traumatized, we know they're broken, we know they're hurt. So what are some ways that we can get ahead of this problem rather than, always running behind it? And I can tell you that a lot of the conversations about trauma, we should have been having these conversations 10 years ago, but we're just starting to have these conversations and being willing to apply that narrative to these young people and see them as broken rather than seeing them as many criminals or as, we've had politicians, call them super predators, and then wonder why the mainstream, even our liberal allies who are, liberal in political orientations, have a very conservative public safety orientation to them, right? And so you have to even get them aware that they have been indoctrinated with this notion that when it comes to public safety, lock them up is the best solution because they haven't been taught about all the other creative things you can do. I will go and sentence a kid, and I may sentence a kid to go watch the documentary movie 13 and come back to court and give me an oral report on what they have learned. Why? Why am I doing that? That don't make no sense. That's not public safety. Yes, it is, because then they learn how their actions are feeding into the machine that can make it worse for them, right? So you got creativity. It's just a matter of who we choose to put that creativity into.
That's incredible. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that insight. And one question. So Lucas, thank you for entering quite a few questions tonight and your engagement throughout. And the one question that we haven't necessarily touched on that we've alluded to, but just what is the purpose of jails? Are jails the best way to serve that purpose? And could we accomplish that same purpose with something that's more equitable and less punitive? And what could that look like?
Yes, that's a very complex question because so what is the purpose of jail? Jail is in many ways it serves multiple different interpretations, and I think we have some wonderful prosecutors in Dane County, especially in the juvenile court, who understand that jail is not the answer. Like jail doesn't answer, but sometimes there are people who cannot control their impulses, and so sometimes a sentence to give them time to rehabilitate is the hope that why we send them there. Now, we call it Department of Correction, but the DOC has moved away from this kind of mantra of rehabilitation, depending on the administration that's happening at the time and what their priorities are. They keep changing back and forth, back and forth. So you got all kinds of individuals who are in these institutions that are not receiving the treatment that they need. So at least from the juvenile perspective, we have chosen to try to ask, how can we assist these kids so that they don't have to incur life of an imprisonment in their life, right? We want them to be in places where they get treatment, where they get trauma treatment, where they're seen, where they're heard, where they're around people who can help them build that trust. Because without those elements, man, there's some people like at a place called St. Charles, who in close outside of Milwaukee, Miss Georgette Wells. I know she ain't on this call, but she like a Black woman, man. She be talking to these kids, get these kids having a conversation that they ain't never had before. And as a result, they don't want to, they find community and they feel safe and they don't want to go back into that. I keep saying we need more of that in Dane County, in our community here. If we want to talk about allyship, we don't have a group home in Dane County. We don't have a RCC, a residential care center in Dane County. All these resources, the university, hospital, all these resources we talking about, we don't get a chance to apply those resources to these kids because when we have to send them for treatment, we got to send them out of our county or out of our state. So a lot of the attention, yes, it's on adults and what you do for adult prison. But I'm telling you right now, man, I got kids in Tennessee. I got kids in Detroit, got kids in Arkansas. We've got kids everywhere because we don't have and we have not invested in the resources here locally to provide those talents and things to our families and our children right in our local areas, right? It just, as Brian Stevens says, we send them away because it allows, so we don't have to see it, and it allows for them to stay broken. And as a result, we stay broken too. So that's something that we can work on together, right? We can reimagine. And it'd be nice, Dr. G, us to have a conversation about how we reimagine juvenile justice in Dane County, because I don't think the community has been included in, sitting down to reimagine what it could look like for us to do something different in Dane County for our young people. Just reimagine it. What does a reimagined process look like? What does a reimagined community look like?
Hear, hear.
Right?
I love it.
Do you? Do you really?
I do. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
I'm not gonna lie to a judge because I know what you can do to people.
Yeah. Well, I don't have jurisdiction over you, so okay. I can't do nothing to you. Just smile.
Another question that we had kind of in that same conversation of reimagining and creativity and just sharing that ideation, right? And just the way that we can do and be different. Susan asked about the increased diversity among judges that you spoke of. And she asked, what interaction do you have with one another when it comes to sharing ideas, discussing philosophy, et cetera? Clearly, so many could take a page out of your book, right? And how often do you have a chance to learn from and grow with each other?
Yeah, I mean, there are young judges coming up all over the place, and it's crazy because I'm not that old, but it's like but I've been in it longer than they have. So we have conversations all the time. My role is to support the ones who are coming up with a sense of encouragement, so that they know that they can both be within the realm of the law and yet at the same time still represent their humanity in that process. And I will say that, you got women, my white ally women who's on the bench, man, they just bring it like, kind of like Jill and, Susan, my mentor, Shelley Gaylord, who was like my mentor, and people couldn't stand Shelly, but man, Shelly was like, we got to do something different, man. We got to be about something better. And I'm looking at that Jewish white woman. I'm like, gee, go ahead, girl. I got you. I got you. And you know what I'm saying? She laid a foundation for me that was rough. She was fighting these battles. And then I stepped in behind her, and they think I'm like, the Messiah or something because they don't have to deal with her. But she was out there fighting hard for these kids, fighting hard for these families, and she was saying, we got to do something better. We got to hold people accountable. And so she was like the one who showed me. And I began to, pick up on that rhythm, and I began to share that with my other colleagues as they come up into this space, that they can have the courage to do this and trust that the decisions that they make will be both humane, and that they can go home and they can sleep at night because they have put their heart into their decision. And, sometimes we think of it as being objective, like, let me just be distant. But the reality is the best decisions are the ones you put your heart into, so that when you leave that bench, you know that you have left them not only what the law requires, but also what our hearts and our souls need in order to feel safe and better. So that is what I do, right? I'm gonna send, sometimes I have to send people to prison, but it's not that you send people to prison, it's how you send them. I don't just throw them away. I tell them why I believe in them. I tell them why I think that they can be great, how they can be powerful, what their futures can be like, why they can change the world, why this can be a setback, and this setback is only a setup for a comeback. Or I give them an inspirational quote about the power of belief and change. And then I tell them, use this as a moment to be a catalyst for the rest of your future. Don't let nobody else define you, because I'm not throwing you away. I ain't forgot you. I'll never forget you. And I keep bringing you back to remind you that I see you and that you're not invisible. You may have made a bad choice, but you're never a human. You're never a bad person. So I need to make sure that they feel that. And that's how you send people away, that allows for them to have a road back, that allows for them to fit back into this world and be able to contribute better, rather than trying to run toward whatever definition society tells them they have to be.
That's a gift. That's beautiful.
Wow. Yes. Thank you I can't believe the hour's already up.
I know, right? That went quick.
I wish we could keep this going for another hour, but I know you were also on a 2-hour call before this. So I want to thank you, Judge Everett Mitchell. Before we end the call, I love that we ended there with the compassion that you have as a judge, and really, again, the way that you lead differently than most judges. And so really quickly, I do want to introduce Rebecca RCA. And just really, again, she's the director of mobilization at Nehemiah, and just talking through some additional educational opportunities and ways to get involved, because we're hoping that this conversation really inspires you. As you heard Dr. G say, this was just the first step to listen to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you to everyone who put so much work into organizing this event. We have lots of contact list volunteer opportunities still at Nehemiah. If you're feeling moved tonight after what you've heard, the first thing that I'm really excited to share with you is our new education opportunity for volunteers at Nehemiah. We have a brand new volunteer onboarding course, and throughout the process of that course, you can get to know Nehemiah as an organization. You can get to know our vision and values, our staff, our history, and then you'll be able to walk through what our direct support services for the African American community look like, what our Justified Anger initiative is, which kinds of volunteer teams you can get involved with, and some exercises in how to be a great ally, concluding with the actual volunteer onboarding, where you sign up to get involved and you turn in your waiver and you become an official part of the volunteer team. So I'm so excited to invite anyone here in this call to do that. It's really easy to get signed up through our learning platform. And thank you to Dawn for dropping that link for me. In terms of affiliating or donating, we're still looking for sustained monthly donors. We have an excellent new interface for donating, so I hope you all enjoy the ease of that. We're very much looking for help with the 13th annual pre-Mother's Day brunch. That's an event that Miss Jackie hosts. If you've seen her on a previous episode of LIA and you'd like to get involved with something she's doing, she's available. Always looking for essentials at the Allied Wellness Center. So those are toiletries, household items, things like that. And you can always look at your volunteer bulletin to see any of these opportunities, including what we need for the reentry team and the learning pod as well. And last but not least, you can join one of our volunteer teams. Court observers are about to get started on their next round of training. That's going to begin on May 18th. It goes from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. that night. And it's actually a 3-part series, 2 weeks apart for each class. And that really just trains you to look at the justice system. So that would be something that would be very much in alignment with what was happening here tonight, which you were hearing from Judge Mitchell. We also have a research team, a media team, an administrative team, a phone call team. If you have a skill, we have a place for you to use that skill. And I very much encourage you to get in touch with us and get started on that kind of work if that interests you. That is all for me this evening. Thanks, crew.
Amazing. Thank you, RCA, for sharing all of that rich information. So that actually is our Ally in Action challenge for this month. I have a slide for this, but you all, this is not my strength. I am like a later millennial. Tech is not my favorite thing. However, here's where I'm at. There is an Ally in Action challenge for the month of May until we meet again. And that challenge is simply to educate, donate, and affiliate and truly dig into these volunteer opportunities that RCA has shared with us, right? We know that allyship is a verb. It is a journey, not a destination. And in its simplest forms, those 3 things that Dr. G shares with us each and every time we speak around allies, educating, donating, and affiliating, Nehemiah makes it so easy and actionable to do that. And they need us to dig in and get involved. We really just want to challenge you to take that step and elevate with volunteering through Nehemiah. So as we've just heard, right, there is an abundance of opportunities as we approach the 1-year mark of this team, right, and this Lean Into Allyship initiative. None of this could be possible without Dr. G. None of this could be possible without the team at Nehemiah and Justified Anger and the efforts that we are able to partner in these events on a monthly basis. And without their support, we wouldn't have had this last year of learning. So we really just implore you to get involved and to take action in whatever that capacity means for you. There were definitely questions that we did not get to tonight for the event. Thank you so much for sharing them, letting us know what's on your mind and heart. We do our best to carry them over to future events, and we do keep a running list to continue to, reflect back on and work through when we're looking at future content. Before I give any thank yous, Dr. G and Judge Mitchell, did you have any closing remarks or anything additional that you wanted to share?
I was really appreciative. I know the judge had to take off to handle something else, but I just certainly appreciate just how judicious and generous he is with his time. But again, Samantha, you, Daniel, AJ, Lauren, appreciate how you all live out what it means to be an ally and supporting us in this. Just a shameless plug. If any of you are professional graphic artists, our Black Like Me podcast team really, really needs some help. So please, if you work in that area, please follow up with RCA because we've got some exciting things we want to do. But I love this space and I'm so proud to partner with you all in this. So thank you. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you so much. I would actually second that plug for Black Like Me. If you want extra credit in your Ally in Action challenge, definitely watch Dr. G's episode with Judge Everett Mitchell, who we just spoke with tonight. I think it ran most recently as a relevant redrop last summer, I think July last summer. And then also I saw that Don had dropped in the link to your most recent conversation with Jill Karofsky, and that was incredible as well. So for extra credit, make sure that you are listening to Black Like Me on a weekly basis for all of those incredible new drops that come in. And if you need somewhere to start, those 2 episodes are really excellent. We would also ask that you mark your calendars for our next Lean Into Allyship event, which will be Tuesday, May 25th. We'll have more information on that to come. We absolutely acknowledge that this event will be held on the 1-year mark of George Floyd's murder, and that will certainly be a core consideration of the conversation. So more information to come on that, but Tuesday, May 25th will be our next event. And as always, Dan and I really just have so many thank yous to give for this event. So to Judge Mitchell for joining us and giving us his invaluable intellect and wisdom and heart and perspective and honesty. We're so grateful. And to you, Dr. G, for your vision and your leadership in the racial justice space and the investment and trust that you have made in us and that you give to our attendees here every month. Dan came to you, with this idea and intention. A year later, we're so grateful to get to continue to work and grow alongside you. So thank you for listening and being willing to help us kind of see where this could go. To the Nehemiah team, to RCA, Don and Eli for your partnership and passion in planning and delivering these events each month, as well as AJ Keeler, who is our newest support team contributor for our events, and to the Generator for giving us their technology and support each and every time. From the very beginning, when we came to you and we needed a home from which to grow, and you let us use your platform. So we are ever grateful for your involvement. And finally, a thank you to everyone who is still hanging on with us here on the event, for joining us, for acknowledging your responsibility to be the change and to unlearn and to unpack what all of this means for you, and how we can do and be how we must do and be better over this past year. So watch for a follow-up email to come from Justified Anger that will include links to our previous sessions, the resources shared tonight, and other great content that we're working on. I think that covers everything. Thank you everyone so much. Have a great night, and we will see you May 25th.